Hey, what is going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com, checking in with you on this Monday afternoon, I guess Monday morning, Monday afternoon, whatever you want to call it. We're nearing the lunch hour, so to speak. Hanging out with Gianna Hahn today to chat a little Auburn football as we get ready for spring football, which is finally upon us. We've been talking about it for quite some time now, obviously counting down the days until we get a little bit more football in our veins, and now it's here, and we get the opportunity to really kind of unmask this new Auburn football program under head coach Brian Harsin. And I want to start there with you, Gianna. I realize that access has been obviously limited. There's been several press conferences, signing day. We've gotten a little bit of intel on who this new head coach is and Brian Harsin. I just want to get your take, kind of what you're hearing around the program. How are people kind of taking to this new coach when we don't really have a lot of information at this point as to what this new Auburn football team might look like?
Yeah, like you said, we had 3 press conferences, and so we know what he told us from that. But outside of that, we haven't learned much. We've never seen him coach in a game. We've never seen him on the sidelines. We've never learned any of those things. And I actually talked to a bunch of people from Boise State to kind of learn a little bit about who he was there. But of course, Boise State is a different culture and a different team and a different conference than Auburn. Like, it's just a different place. So there's a lot to learn from him. I think, as you're always going to have, you have different camps right now from what I'm seeing in like comments on Twitter and like listening to conversations around campus. You've got the people who think Gus was fired unfairly. You have the people who didn't like Gus, and so they're all on for Harsin. You have the people that think Harsin is way out of his depth because, everyone doesn't like when you take from outside the SEC sometimes. But then you also have a decent number of people who, if I were a fan, this is what I would be, in the wait and see. Like, we don't know anything right now, so let's just be hopeful and we'll see. But yeah, so I think like this spring camp is going to be really big because you can finally see a little bit more about him and the players as well, because they've seen him in workouts. And I know that his whole thing is he's very into hard work. He's going to make you work hard too. So we know that about him because they've been doing workouts, but they've never had him coach them through they shouldn't have had him coach them through drills yet or anything like that. So they're going to start getting a little bit of on-field Harsin.
Yeah, and I think you kind of break it down. There is very much a wait and see approach. I think that there is a level of excitement because it is something new. But like anything else, change is difficult. Change is tough. It's tough when you bring in someone new, don't know what to expect. Obviously, he brings in his coaching staff, but there's still staff members and obviously players that, were under the old regime. And now it's like, okay. So it's kind of like dipping your toe on both sides of the excitement. And this is exciting. We're going to turn the page. And then also that sort of, okay, I really kind of like what he's doing here, but I'm not as big of a fan of this, and you're always going to have that obviously with every coaching staff and everything they bring. And I think it's great. You've talked to people out of Boise. I've mentioned this before. I had the opportunity to cover 3 Boise State games in 2019 to get to know them a little bit. And what's interesting, you talk about that, we're about to embark on spring football here. And we have to remind people spring football was not a thing last year. We didn't have a spring football. And I think this is a critical time. Most players will tell you this. Every player I've talked to, coaching staff, said not having spring football was really detrimental to them a season ago. And so I know that this will be even more important for this new Auburn football program under Coach Harsin. So the burning questions, the 5 headlines that we're covering, and you had a great article, 5 questions heading into Auburn spring football on AL.com. So go check that out if you guys haven't had a chance. But Gianna in the flesh here is going to break that down. So obviously, who is Brian Harsin being one of those? Let's kind of break down one of the really big storylines that everyone always wants to talk about, especially this year for Auburn, the quarterback battle. Is it going to be Bo Nix? Or, and I put a big or there in the rundown because, well, who could it be? So kind of give us what we can expect in terms of the quarterback battle, if we will see one. Or do you think Bo Nix is going to be the guy?
I don't know. I think they give Bo Nix a chance because what I'm saying is that Harsin came in with a 5-star talent, and yes, Bo didn't make a big jump over the last year, but also one of the talking points about Harsin, one of the things that they said drew them to him is that he is known for his track record with quarterbacks, and Harsin was a quarterback himself. So from what I'm getting of Harsin's character is that he likes challenges because he gave up his alma mater to come to Auburn and play in the hardest conference. So that makes me think he will take on the challenge of working with Bo and pulling out that potential that people saw because they made him there aren't many 5 stars, out there. And so I think that he will try to take that challenge. The other thing that some of the Boise State people told me about again is that some of those Boise State quarterbacks didn't make that jump until junior year. That's where Bo is. And now Bo definitely has some things that need to be fixed from his fundamental standpoint, but maybe Harsin can fix it so he can take a stab, and he's still going to have those other people if it doesn't work out. It's his first year here, so he always has that excuse, right? But what I'm curious about is if they straight up say, hey, we're working with Bo, or if they're going to be like, this is a quarterback battle. I kind of feel like they'll say the latter because every coach always says there's quarterback, well, not just a battle for a quarterback position, but for any starting position. And so I feel like that's what they're going to say. But I mean, before, whenever people called for Bo to get benched, the quarterbacks behind them probably weren't it wasn't very equal. But now you have Demetrius Davis coming in, and he is going to be young, and he probably has to beef up a little bit, get a little bit bigger. But he also is, as everyone says, a proven winner. And he's got some talent that it's just there. You don't have to teach it. So I don't know if we'll see him or not, but he definitely will be a storyline. And if it's not this year, it might be next year, the year after. So yeah, I think that was one of my biggest questions is he gonna go for Bo? I think he might, or is it going to be a full-on battle?
Yeah, great insight there, certainly. But I'm with you. Most coaches aren't going to be like, hey, the quarterback position belongs to, especially when you have a new coach coming in that really has his work cut out for him as well, and trying to kind of get his hands on the quarterbacks and mold them into what he wants them to be. Now, who's going to step up at wide receiver? There are quite a few holes to plug there. And, you have Eli Stove. Obviously, he was the only returning senior. Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, all gone. So what is the receiving core going to look like this upcoming season?
Yeah, Stove technically could have come back because of the extra year, although totally understandable that he didn't. But if Schwartz and Williams had come back, man, they would have been so dangerous. But once again, understandable that they wanted to take their skill and see what they could do. And if you think about it, they have been in transition since they got here. First, they were freshmen. Then they had to transition to a new quarterback, then a new offensive coordinator. And if they would have said it would have been a new coach. So how much would they have been able to shine? So now you have left behind a very good group of wide receivers. They're extremely talented. Multiple times the older guys, the ones who all just left, have said this might be one of the best, last year might have been one of the best classes of freshman wide receivers that they've had. And you even saw 2 of them get super involved early. So you had Zevion Capers and you had Kobe Hudson. And so Zevion got hurt. And I don't really know what his status is right now in terms of his injuries and whether he'll participate in spring, but he kind of already established that you can trust him. You can go to him. Kobe Hudson was mostly used for his blocking skill, which is really good. But what Eli Stove told me is that he thinks he might be the guy that steps up and is a leader. So it won't just be his skill, which he has shown a little bit of, but it will also be his leadership abilities. He also mentioned in Shedrick Jackson, he said he's more of a quiet leader, but he's going to be that most experienced guy. He's going to also be someone that they all turn to. And then he pointed out, for example, there's so many other guys. I can't even go through them all. But for example, Elijah Canyon only played in, I think, 2 games. But in that one game, the I want to say Citrus Bowl, mix that up with Outback Bowl. He just jumped up the stat sheet because he had such amazing plays. And he just broke out within one game. If you have the ability to just do that against Northwestern team, those runners up in the Big Ten, then who knows what type of jump he can make now that he's used to the speed. So there's definitely going to be a lot of talent. It's just whether like how that lines up with the experience and who is going to emerge from a huge talent pool. So that'll be an interesting thing to follow, is see which ones become big names, or if they all kind of rotate in and out. So
Yeah, you mentioned Elijah Canyon in your article there, playing in just 2 games, 3 catches for 80 yards. I think definitely showing off some explosive firepower there as a receiver. So I think the receiving core, is somewhat flying under the radar. So I think that brings another level of excitement of, who steps up, what's next. Obviously, everyone wants to know what the defensive line is going to look like. No longer will Kevin Steele be at the helm leading this defense. How does this Auburn defense look different? What can we expect? What are those expectations going to be from the defensive standpoint?
yeah, so that's like always been something that Auburn's super proud of, right? So I think it would have been a highlight anyways, but now you have a new defensive coordinator, as you said, who also runs a little bit of a different system. Both Brian Harsin and Derek Mason, their whole thing is all about versatility, being creative, having guys who can do multiple things. That's really, I think, the best way to put it, is having Derek Mason has been known to have guys who can play up in the line, go after the quarterback, but then drop back into coverage. So Auburn kind of had something like that. They had the Buck, right? But that was mainly just a defensive lineman. This is a little bit more versatile than the Buck was. And then Boise State, I know that Harsin's more the offensive guy, but on the defensive side, they had a stud who is a little bit similar. It's kind of between what Mason had and what Auburn has. So the question here is, one, what's it look like? So I think everyone will be interested to see what it looks like as a whole. But the other thing is, where are some of these players going to fall, since the positions are kind of different? Because you had like Derek Hall, Colby Boyden, they were playing on the edge, right? But especially Derek Hall, who might be able to play outside linebacker. Then you have 2 guys coming in who played. Well, you have multiple guys coming in who were multiple in high school or in college. Akuliota, for example, he didn't play much at Northwestern in terms of like being a starter, because this is really interesting. Someone pointed this out to me, that the Big Ten runs so much and doesn't pass like the SEC does, so they don't need a pass rusher. And he's known as for being a pass rusher, but he also played outside linebacker in high school, so he can also play all over the line and back, which would, it'll be interesting to see where he falls. So some of these guys, it's like, yeah, they established themselves last year in this position. Well, that position might not be there anymore, or it might not mean the same thing. So that's going to be another thing, is where will people fall?
Definitely. And as we wrap things up, Gianna, great insight from you. Experience at the offensive line. Just how will that play a role, do you think, having that experience on the O-line? I know that's kind of been an area of question in recent years. What kind of expectations do you have there?
Yeah, so I read a very good article by Justin Ferguson, kind of breaking down whether, like, what experience can mean. So I guess through the data, it shows that experience itself, like in terms of years, doesn't mean much. It's more about starts, and then it's about the blue chip ratio. So they can't do much about that except for by recruiting, but they do have way more starts all across that line. I mean, it was bad, but it's also good, kind of, in the long term, that they dealt with so much adversity, because so many guys stepped up, so they know like who they can rely on. But that's going to be also another, where will people fall? Because, for example, Keandre Jones wasn't that group of like core starters they finally established partway through the season, because they didn't have them all through spring. Well, they have spring, and they didn't have them all together through fall. But then he turned out to be one of the most reliable guys out there. So now that the people are healed that he filled in for, are you going to move him back, or are you going to let him have that position? But then his position, he came in from Brandon Council, but Brandon Council can play all the way across the line. So how will he fit in? But every time we interview them, they're like, it's about the chemistry. And that is something that only getting experience on the field can do. So I think that you will see an improvement from that standpoint. You have those starts that the data talked about, and then you're going to have that chemistry. But also, the rest of the SEC is also getting better from having spring camp this year. So I don't know how much that will combat the, you know, the whole like blue chip ratio talent type perspective. But the other thing I think to mention that we haven't really thought about was the junior college guys that they got last year, because one was hurt. And so he will now be, we didn't think about him at all. So now he'll be an option. And then another one just has been putting on weight. Like he just wasn't big enough, but he has experience. Like he's older than those other guys. So those might be factors. So I don't know. That's another thing I'm curious about is how it'll actually make a difference. We're not going to find out this spring, like at all, but it's just something to think about as we go in.
Yep, I would definitely say you could. Your headline saying 5 questions heading into Auburn spring practice. Curious would definitely be another headline, or at least word that you could put in there. I think we're all very curious about what is going to happen. Definitely excited about it. Things kick off, I guess, later today. We'll hear from Coach Harsin, and then, of course, I know there'll be some viewing periods that the media will get to participate in up in the coming weeks. So definitely looking forward to that. We'll make sure we keep up to date. Obviously, Gianna, we appreciate all your insight as well. You can follow her on social media, and of course, go check out her article. Very insightful stuff there on AL.com. So we appreciate you, and we appreciate all you guys for watching. We'll check in with you all soon.